is you can get in touch with me from robsewell.com. Get all the details there to be able to get in touch with me, whatever means you need to. And if you want to, hold off 1 second while I shut this door. Because my camera's pretty good, so you probably couldn't hear that. But my mother, who lives next door, is decided to mow the lawn in the sunshine. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions in the future. That's the database ring. That's already gone, but there is a FabCon in Europe, and there'll be more coming through. So I kept that there. So keep that idea in your head. So I'm not going to spend time introducing Fabric to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Fabric SQL database and the things that Microsoft wanted to get at the forefront of their deployment when they wanted to start using Fabric SQL database. They want to get every database under source control. This is something very, very close to my heart. I'm a strong believer in source control, automation, CI/CD, and I know it's hard. I know it's hard because I spend a lot of time with a lot of people helping them to do it. But Microsoft wanted to get every database under source control. And they wanted to make it easy for you to self-service a development database, make it disposable. If you talk to me, I'll tell you, yeah, sure, use a container. You can use dev containers. We can spin things up and throw them away really quickly. But for other people, for other teams, that's too much hard work, or their laptops are locked down, or there are so many other things they don't want to learn. They want to concentrate on delivering the value for the customer. And Microsoft wanted it to be easy. So they want to have to learn all this new stuff. They want to make it as easy as possible. Now, there's some good things about that, because it'll hopefully bring a whole bundle of people forward into using CI/CD. The folks that know how to do some of this stuff are going to find some bits where they're like, no, can't I do that? Or can't I do this? So you got to remember, what we're looking at here is a low friction. Yeah, we want it to be easy to be able to get through. So some of those little knobs and buttons that you've got that you can switch to do things are not going to be available to you in this process. And that's a good thing, because it's going to simplify it. It's going to bring everybody closer together, makes it easier for us to all know what's going on. But Microsoft knew that that was going to be an issue, so they have also kept some of these capabilities available for other tools. So you're still going to be able to do that stuff. So most of your Fabric work is going to be done inside a browser. And inside the browser, you're going to be able to create a database, and you're going to be able to put it into source control, and you're going to be able to commit your changes and understand what is going on nice and quickly. Make it flip through real quick. And it's nice and easy to see in the browser. You can see here, there's a source control button, and there's a button that says changes. So it says something has changed. So we're going to be able to see what that process looks like. But that's going to enable you to go and get your database, start working on it, and then commit it into your source control. And you can very quickly link it to, this is Azure DevOps repos, Azure repos. GitHub will also come along in the future. You can quickly just link everything up. So now you have your database schema stored in code. And I would tell you, if you've got a database, you should have the schema stored in code. And you should use CI/CD, even if it's just in the background and you're doing it reactively. At least get your database schema into source control. Fabric makes it nice and simple and easy. The code that it creates, if we start to dive into what actually happens in the background, it's exactly the same as a database project that we would have created for the last 10 years. So inside there, we have a database project, which is just a bundle It's basically just a directory. And inside that, you're going to have some scripts. And they're going to be redeployment scripts. They're going to be the objects that we have. So not the alter statements, but actually the create statements for each of your objects that you've got in your database. And then you might have some post-deployment scripts. And your SQL package is going to bundle that all up into a DAC pack. What's a DAC pack? It's a fancy zip file. Like most of these deployment things, they're just zip files with a load of stuff inside them. And that means that we have a defined reference for our database structure that we have statically created at that moment in time with that commit history that is going to store what changes we're making to our database schema. We can make use of these SQL projects in Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio. No more Azure Data Studio, unfortunately that is gone, but that capability with the SQL extension in Visual Studio Code is absolutely wonderful. That's what we will see today. You can also do it in Visual Studio if you wish to take your development process to use that tool. Straight from our Visual Studio Code, we can right-click on our database project with the extension, and we can click this build button, and it is going to take all of those flat files that you see on the left, the store procedures, check user token that you can see there, and bundle them up into a DAC pack, fancy zip file. But before it does that, it's going to make sure that everything is syntactically correct. So it's going to make sure that all of your references are about right. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Make sure that we've got everything that we need to be able to define the end state of our database. And then you can also see there's a publish button. And the publish button is going to enable SQL package to go, okay, this is my code. This is what I want the database to look like. And over there is the database. And I'd like to just have a look at the two and work out how to do it best. And that will enable us to just automate the publishing of our code. So let's go back a step, get into Fabric. And what we want to do is we want to take our Fabric workspace, a block where we put our Fabric resources, and we're going to have a Git repository, and we're going to connect this workspace to the main branch of our repository. There's a picture. In fact, this might even be that. It might even have been a video, but we're going to go and have a look at that. So we'll have our workspace with our database already in it, and we can connect it to our source control. We can then pull that source control code into Visual Studio Code and keep working on it from there. We can then push our changes back into our main branch, into our remote repository, and then we can get Fabric to automatically update. So there's two halves there. You can do everything in Fabric. Don't have to worry about Visual Studio Code. You can keep it all in Fabric. You can commit your changes. You can work yourself around with that in Azure DevOps or GitHub, or you can include Visual Studio Code. So this is the bit where it's allowing you to do things really simply, really low friction, but also enabling you to use some other what's the word I was looking for? Tools. Tools is what I was looking for. Let's see what's next. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to flip us back into Fabric. Have a look at some Fabric. Here is Fabric. Now, I promised that I would show just a tiny bit of Fabric tools. Fabric tools is like DBA tools for Fabric. It's very, 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 very new. In fact, you won't, unless you go and get the code and download it, you won't even be able to do this bit that I'm doing now. But what I can do is I can run get Fabric workspace, and it'll say, oh, great. It goes, hang on a minute, Rob, you need to log in, which is a little bit frustrating because I had just logged in, but that's okay. We have the capability. So we're going to use this, and we're going to use this password. And of course, what you must always do is you must always have MFA on all of your things. That is beyond important these days. So we want to have 36. And that's going to go through there. And there we go. Boom. Now we can see here are our workspaces. So I've got my personal workspace. I've got a test workspace, a sampler production workspace, and a sampler CI/CD. So let's just do one more thing with our workspaces. Let's just grab our SQL databases. So, poof, poof, poof. DBA tools like Experience, Fabric tools in the PowerShell at the command line. We've said for every one of our workspaces, get me the Fabric SQL databases that are in there. Naming things is really hard. So Jess and I generally just put a Y on the end. It's a bit of a UK soccer thing in that you would always call your teammate Sulzy or, Jesse, or it would always have an E on the end. So we've got database E. And in our next workspace, we've also got database E, and then we've got our CI/CD database. But you can see we've also got all of our connection strings. So that's just a little peek into Fabric Tools, the PowerShell module. Keep your eye on it because it's going to be super neat. If we look at our workspaces, what we have in our workspaces, there's the 3 workspaces that we just saw: test, production, and a CI/CD. We are now in our sampler test workspace. And inside that, I've got my database, which I've cunningly named database. Get rid of that so I can see if there are any questions as we go along. Oops. Brilliant. And we can now click into this, and we can see that inside database, we've got some schemas, we've got some tables. Turns out we've got some addresses and some products. We can select some rows, and you can see that what we like to do is do cycling, which is something I'm very keen on. I like to go and cycle. So this is a cycling shop. It is, of course, the AdventureWorks light database. So we have some data in here. And what we can do to make sure that we have this database into our source control is let's go to our, there we go, sampler test. We can go to our workspace settings. We can find our Git integration. We can pick our Azure DevOps, connect with our accounts, pick an organization, and a project, and a repository. So this is the code. So we might have numerous ones of those. We've got some branches. So I'm going to pick a new branch. So a new branch, we'll call it DBA-VUG, and we'll create that from main. Why not? And we want a Git folder. So where should we hold our stuff? We'll call it workspace, because that will then say that anything inside this folder in this directory are going to be things to do with our workspace. Oh, it says, hey, workspace doesn't currently exist. Would you like to create a new folder and sync? Oh, yes, please. Thank you very much. Let's do that. So now you can see up at the top here, it says, I am syncing content from this workspace to Git. And next to each one of the resources, we've got a syncing status for the things that we've got. If we were to go and have a look into our repository in Azure DevOps, we can see that we've got a new branch called DBA-VUG, and it has now started to pull some things in. So we've got a workspace. It's got our database, which is a SQL database, and we've got our schema into our tables, into our views. We've even got some security. So if we looked at, say, our customer, what you're going to see here is we've got a create table. So literally, however long that took, we have just ticked off number 1 on the box. Can we put a database into source control nice and simply? Yes, we can. Easy. It's been done. Okay, so let's have a look at the workflow that we had there. So if we went into our database, we can do it here. Maybe we wanted to create a view. So maybe you want to do sales by country. So I can write some T-SQL. There's already in. Okay, we're going to have one called virtual user group, because I obviously didn't clean that up as earlier. There we go. So we've created a new view. This is live in our database. So we can have a look in our database, and if we refresh, it'll oh, that's strange. Oh, look, I put it in the DB. Oh, what a fool. I've put it into the wrong place. But never mind, it's okay. What we'll do is we'll go back to this workspace, and oh, look, we've got this thing that's here. It says uncommitted, and up here we've got a box that says 1. Right, let's see what we've got here. So it says, I've spotted that you've got some changes in your database. Straight into our database, coding live. I mean, this test, but coding live. Here we go. Here are our changes. I can select those, and I can put in an optional commit message. Now, I will tell you, because I believe very strongly in this, and I, in fact, do presentations literally on this box that we're talking about here, but there's nothing optional about a commit message, because it is very important to understand why we have made this change, so that the virtual user group can understand about source control in Fabric, because that is why I've made the change. Hang on a minute, Rob. Surely we want to know what change we've made. And that's true. And you'll see up here, it says I'm committing, it says I'm committing your changes. Where's that notification gone? It's up there. I'm committing your changes. You'll get a notification, and there is the notification. Okay, let's flip back and have a look. If we look in Azure DevOps, we can look at our commits, and we can see that in our DBA-VUG branch, we've got a commit. This is why I made my commit. This is something here. So I maybe in real world, I'm linking this to some work that I'm doing, linking this to a particular request, whatever that might be, because I can see what has been changed just by looking in this tool. I'm zoomed in a bit here, but if we were to zoom out a bit, you can see that it's all green and pluses, but we've added this new thing. It knows exactly what this is. So we've done some work in our Fabric. We've made some changes. We've put them into source control. So that's number 1 status done. Now let's jump into Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code, here is our Fabric test. Here are our views. Oh, look, right. So let's script this one as drop, because we don't want that one anymore, because that was a mistake. And what we probably want to do is we want to okay, I'm going to move this one from the DBO schema into the sales schema. Okay, so I'm going to change this, and I'm going to come here into my database projects. So my database projects extension inside Visual Studio Code, I can see that I've got essentially exactly the same as I've got in my Azure DevOps view. I've got the create table T-SQL for those things. And if I make sure that I'm in the right branch, Rob, if I jump into the DBA-VUG branch, then what we should do is we should end up with, let's refresh you. Here we go. We've got some views. So I'm going to delete this view in source control because we don't need that one anymore. It's in the wrong schema. So we're not going to save that. And I'm going to move this into here. Are you sure you want to move? Yep, move. Thank you very much. So I've put it into there. Now, I better be careful because otherwise it'll just recreate it back in the DBO schema, won't it? So this is source control. If I was to look in my SQL Server, then I still have my VUG view and it's still in DBO. If I was to look in my project, I've moved the view into the sales schema. So now I'm going to write a commit message because you can see here I've got, it knows what I've done. It says I've deleted and recreated, but I've just moved it really. Here, look, we've got these things. I call them sparkles. I don't know what they are. They're sparkles. And if you've got Copilot, you can do this. Now, there is a load of more stuff you can do to make this even more brilliant. But for right now, we're going to put it like that. I don't like that. So that we can change the schema. So we know that what we've done. Oh, I've got a spelling mistake. That's okay. Now, if I sync this change back to my remote repository with that push, and I come back to here and look at my commits. There's my commit message. Here are the changes. So you see, knows that I've got rid of this, knows that I've added that. But now look, remember I was saying this, oops, let's put that on the right page, Rob. No, still the wrong page. Let's try that one instead. You see here, we've got some blue. Oh, good work, Rob. And we've got some red, taking stuff away, added in the sales. So that's good. And if I go back to Fabric and get rid of this notification bar and do a refresh, and look at what happens now. So I've made my change in Visual Studio Code. I could have done it in Visual Studio. I could have done it flat files in the Git. And of course, this is the moment when we wait for stuff. Oh, look, excellent. So, oh, that's nice. It's decided that we've got some conflicts. Excellent. So I've got a update here for databases and I've got a change here. So what I might be able to do is accept my incoming change. If you accept the change, it's going to overwrite correct. That is because I deleted the table in the SQL Server and made a change to that object. Sorry, with the view, and made a change to that object in source control. So now we've got this updating all. And we'll let that munch away. Maybe it'll work, maybe it'll fail. Either way, we will learn something, which is cool. So we just did both sides of this. We took our changes from Fabric on the left-hand side of that screen and pushed them into our source code and then pushed it back to our database. And we also pulled those changes down to our local machine where we could work on it. Remember, I could even work on that offline. I could work on that in the airplane, but I wouldn't be able to push it back to the remote. Probably. Yeah, I know. Sometimes there's Wi-Fi in planes, but you know, we push it back and then we can update. Okay, so we won't listen to Drew telling you the same thing. No, we won't listen to Drew telling us the same thing. Brilliantly, I've managed to not get my pointer working with this machine. There we go. So here in our slides, and I'll make sure the slides are available for you, you can see that we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about how we're putting our commit messages in, and we're seeing those changes within our source control. And this enables us to have both sides. Here we go. We can have low friction deployments, make it easy for us to get databases into source control, be able to update them straight within the browser where you're used to working if you're used to using Fabric on the left. On the right, we can do things in a more mature way. So if you're a more mature team, you can actually then clone and pull and push all of those things back into your source control. That's really good for your databases. But in the real world, we don't just have dev and somewhere else. We've got multiple things going on. We've got multiple workspaces. We've got dev and test and UAT and QA and SAT and all the rest of the ATs and ETs. How can we work with that? We might want to be deploying other resources at the same time. Let's go back to the browser, see what's happened with our, there we go. Excellent. That's a good sign. Before I get too hot, I shall open that door. That's a good sign. So our source control synced, it sorted out our merge conflicts. Now our test workspace is in sync with our source control. We tell that because up here, we have no red. Down here, everything is synced. Excellent. Now, let's talk about our workspace. If we take our workspace, we put it into our Git integration there. But if we wanted to deploy, so we've got a thing called a deployment pipeline. Now, naming things is hard. You will have pipelines for manipulating your data, call those data pipelines. You will have pipelines for deploying changes amongst things, call those deployment pipelines. I've set it up in advance and also kept the zoom on. And this means that you will get these three options. At the moment, there are just three. And you can see that we can take this development, let's zoom out in, we'll take this development workspace and say, let's assign our stage, our environment. We'll call it test. We hit that green button. This is a thing that, yes, thank you. This is the thing I always forget to do. Development's now associated with test. So we're going to call this one production. Click this. Yes, we know that. That's cool. Lovely. Thank you. Now we have these things. So let's have a look in our production workspace. Our production workspace also has a database called database. It doesn't have, and you can see I dropped the schema, go away. It doesn't have any tables, any views, doesn't even have the schema. If we were to look at it in Management Studio or in Visual Studio Code, here's our production. We don't have any tables or any views, so nothing doing there. So now I would like to make my schema the same between my sampler test, my development area, and my production area. So let's drag this one up here. I would like to deploy from development these. Oh, you're not going to let me do it now. That's going to be very annoying. Okay, from our development. We're still. Wonderful. See, this is the problem with me setting things up earlier and waiting for them. This is still sitting here. There we go. Good. Right. Thank you. Fabric is a service, and sometimes you have to wait for it. So we have our test environment here. I would like to deploy from development, from my sampler test, with all of those changes in, including that new one. And I will click on, oh, it says, compared to source, they are different. So we're going to click deploy. Yep, just keep going. Let's just deploy. We'll push that stuff into our database. Now, as it happens, one thing that you can do, just to bring it back to, whilst that carries on in the background, just grabbing everything that's in that workspace that we chose, moving it from test into the production workspace, we could have a look here. I mean, you see I've got a Fabric CI/CD database, and that's got exactly the same. It's got no tables, it's got no views, no store procedures. Oh no, some store procedures. So functions. Yeah, some functions. Okay, so it's got some bits and bobs. And remember, we had our database project. So I said that what you could do is you could build this project. So right click and press the build, and it's going to go through and build succeeded. No warnings and no errors. And here's the code that it did, and it has created me a DAC pack. There we go, in my bin debug folder. This will become obvious as to why I'm mentioning these in a minute. Now, what I could do straight from here is I could click publish, and then I could connect to that database, any database, and publish those changes to those schema. But the other thing I can do, if you look down here, is a schema compare. So if we close this and we close that, say I am going to compare my source, which is my project that we've just built, just to make sure that it builds, because that's good development progress. And I'd like to compare it to a target. So I've got my Fabric CI/CD, which I named very badly there. No, so that's obviously not the right one. Let's try the one that we named correctly. There we go. And I've got my database. Now you'll notice when you have a database, a SQL database in Fabric, that the name of the database always has this every time. Let's bring that back again. Always has this GUID back on it to it. That'll teach me to try and look at the thing. There we go. So that can go away. We've always got this GUID on the end of it. And that's so that we can ensure that we've got consistency. I hit this compare button. And now what we're doing is we're now comparing the code that I've got locally in my source with the target. So this is now more complicated than the low friction Fabric way of doing things, and more like how you'd be doing it if you'd been doing this sort of thing for, a number of years. And you can see that what we've got here, I'm going to take away these users. We've got some tables. I'm hoping, there we go. There's our last one. There is our new view, and it tells us that it's going to create a new view. We have it here on the left, and we don't have it on the right. And what I could do, I could generate a script. That's going to create the T-SQL, maybe to give to your DBA, production DBA, to be able to deploy to the thing at the right time, like those things go. I could apply because I just want to get it done. I'll do it now. Or we can just wait and understand these are the changes. We'll see what's happening. So whilst we've been talking about that, let's see what's happened here. Successful deployment. Excellent. All right, so we could check that in Fabric. We can go to database in Fabric. We can look here. We've now got our schemas. We've got our tables. We can query them. Got no data because this is schema deployment only. Very important to remember that. This is our schema only. We're making sure our schema is correct, not our data. So we can see it there. We could also jump into our database. We have a look here. We could look in production. There we go. That's what it did look like. There was nothing there. I can refresh. Here are all of my tables. Yeah. It's like magic. I love it. When you start to see this stuff, see how easy it is. There's no need to be writing scripts and copying around and making sure you're writing the right one in the right order. You just let the tool deal with that stuff. Perfect? No, but it does a really good job. Okay, so we have done a number of things there. So let's see if we have any questions. Yeah. I can use a view because there's no data loss, but there was no data in production anyway, Carl. So I was always happy to be done then. So that made life easy. Okay, so we can use SQL package to do our publish. Now, we're talking now about actually automating the whole thing. So instead of just using our Fabric to do our source control deployments and clicking on the buttons in the browser, or using our deployment pipeline to see that there's been some changes and to deploy our entire workspace up into the next workspace along that we want. Now we want to just concentrate on our database, and we want to bring our existing database development process and move it forward. So in our Azure DevOps, we're going to create a pipeline. A pipeline is going to need to use a service connection. Service connection, I'm always going to tell you that these days you should use a managed workload identity. And if you can just click that top button that says automatic and let Azure do it all for you. If you work in a corporate environment, you probably are not going to have the permissions to do that. So either you get somebody to do it for you, or you have to do a little bit more work where you have to get the app registration created and then add the federated credential to it and muck about like that. But either way, follow the docs. They're relatively straightforward and you can get forward. You create a service connection. You take the name of that service connection. Now you need to give permissions to your SQL database in Fabric. So we'll have a look at how to do that in a second. And then you add your service principal, and then you can use this SQL as your DAC pack deployment to deploy your DAC pack. And I am going to show you just that. Now, first though, I'll tell you what I did wrong and what I needed Jess to help me fix today. So Jess Pomfret is my partner in Mayhem. We do a lot of presentations together, a lot of work together. We work on PowerShell code together. We also go riding bicycles together. She's amazing. And whilst I was trying to get these demos working, I missed one vital little thing. And that is that to be able to do this, you need to be able to no, we don't care about services. You need to do this. You need to make sure that service principals can use the Fabric APIs. Okay, you're enabled. Now you're going to know fairly quickly if that doesn't work, because you need to give the permissions to the SQL database. So we're in our sampler CI/CD database workspace right now. We click on our database. Got this button up at the top that says security, and then click manage. Now we'll go to the owner because that's okay. We'll click this manage access. And that is going to enable us to add some members to this role. And what you'll be looking for, if you've done it automatically, is something that looks like that. Now, if you suddenly start typing beard or whatever you like in top of there, and these things don't come up, and you don't get any service principals, you see I've got plenty of other service principals here as well. That will be because you have not ticked that box that says allow service principals, and that was my mistake. So now you know. So once you've added that DB owner, you can look in this database. You can see we've got no tables in there. We've got no tables. Okay, we do have the schema, but we don't have any tables in there this time. And we have here a pipeline. So if we have a look at our pipeline, pipelines are just YAML, just do some stuff. Here we go. So we are now, that's the wrong branch. That's why I suddenly looked weird. We're looking at an agent pool because to be cheap, I am using a self-hosted one, which is just sitting running here. So I know that we're running. Yes, I know that we're running. And we're using our service connection, and this is the one that we're using. This is the name of the connection in here. So this name here is not the name of the service principal. That's the name that you have to give the permissions to. In your Azure DevOps pipeline, you need to make sure that you give the name of the service connection, and that's what it's going to use. And then we're going to do a build. So we do a .NET build, and that's going to build us a DAC pack. It's going to use the SQL project file in this directory, which we've got in our repository, and then it's going to publish our DAC pack, which is going to be in our bin debug folder. You remember when we looked at doing the build earlier, I said, there it is in the logs, bin debug, that's where our DAC pack is. This is important. Here is the reason why it's important. So we're going to publish this artifact, and then we're going to deploy it. We'll deploy it with our SQL Azure DAC pack deployment task, and we'll use the service connection, server, database, using authentication type of service principal. And then here is the path to our DAC pack, which has come from this publish artifact. We could get more complicated. We can put these into different stages and get approvals and tests and all of those things you should absolutely do. For right now, we're just going to talk about, can we deploy to a Fabric SQL database like we would if we were doing things properly. Notice we've got this additional argument, allow incompatible platform true. So we put that in just to make sure we don't get any of that clash because this is Fabric and maybe we got it built on something else. IP detection method. If we were doing this against an Azure SQL database, maybe we'd be looking at how we could make sure our SQL firewall is open to allow us to do these things and then closed again, etc. Here we're going to have an IP detection method that is auto detect. And now I can run that pipeline. Now, as it happens, it's going to trigger every time there's a change to this branch. So maybe I could do something like this. I could come back to my database project. I could ensure that I'm on the CI/CD branch because that's the one that makes the changes. And then I could, let's delete that view. Oh, that's good. Get rid of both of them. Okay. And let's copy this view and we'll create a new view and call it P&D for VUG. P&D for VUG. I never remember if I need to put .SQL. Nope. There we go. Let's take away that .SQL. I always forget that. Right. And then we will paste all of that, except for this bit. And we'll put it in sales LT. So we're going to have a nice new view here. Yep, I'm going to use a view because we've got no data. I could use a table. What happens if you change a column on a table? Depends. If you do some work beforehand, you can keep all your data. If you don't do any work at all, you're going to lose all your data. Make sure you understand what those things do. It's much more than we can cover in the next 9 minutes. So we've got changes there. Let's see what Sparkle says. Yeah, it's quite boring, but we'll take it for now. And now we're going to sync. So we're going to pass that change back up. I've done some development work in my Visual Studio Code or my Visual Studio. Now I'm going to push that change to the correct branch. Probably going to have pull requests and reviews and tests and all of those good things on top of there. But we'll assume all of those passed because I'm brilliant. No, I'm not brilliant. But there we go. And straight away, we've got a failure. Why have you failed? Let's have a look. Best thing about things that fail is we can always learn something from them. So we tried to do a .NET build and, oh, error. The model already has an element that has the same name. Excellent. You remember the bit when I said all good development processes should make sure that they can build the project? I didn't do that. If I'd done the build, then what we would have found, build failed. Check the out pane for more details. Okay, excellent. So let's have a look. Determine the projects. We did the thing. Make that go away. Build error. The model already has an element that has the same name as sales. Oh yeah, of course it does, because we just copied it. We didn't actually make sure that we had the same thing, except it doesn't look to me like it does. Let's see what happens if I build it now. Oh, build failed. Build failed. This is diddly. Ah, see, if you don't read the error message, you don't get the full information. The model already has an element that has the same name as this. Here we go. What have we got in here? We've got an index. Ah, look at this. There we go. So this should be P and D for VUG. There we go. So we've read the information. This is exactly what would happen in real life. I promise you. You will do this. I will do this. I do it often. Oh, why have you failed this time? Let's have a look. We have process access. Right. Just to fix things, I'm going to cheat and do top. What do I want? Top one. Product ID. Thank you. Yes. Product ID. Thank you. Oh no, we're not going to be able to do that, are we? There we go. We're probably not going to be able to do that. Oh no, we are. Yes, we are. Right. Let's build again. There we go. Build succeeded. Builder succeeded. Yeah, differs in case. That's a warning. I don't mind. Because Rob can't read. That's why we made this change. And we'll just push that change up, because what I want to really show you is this bit, which is the fact that I made the change automatically, and it is now going to go build my DAC pack. Now going to build my DAC pack. There we go. So this is going to look exactly the same as it did in that output. There we go, even with the warning in there. And then it's going to deploy our changes, publish database E. And that means that as soon as it's done that, we can get to our SQL Server here. We'll look at this. Have we done it yet? No, deploying. So I'm going to leave that deploying. Oh no, there we go. It has deployed. So there we go. Hit a refresh. All of our tables and things start coming back in. So we have now gone full circle all the way through. And we have completed this process. So within SQL Database Fabric CI/CD, Application Lifecycle Management, we have been able to deploy straight from within Fabric, from Fabric deploy into other workspaces. We'll be able to use SQL projects in Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio to then completely do the entire process with a SQL package of publish and Azure DevOps. So that shows you that they have achieved all of the things that they set out to when they first started to think about putting SQL database in Fabric. They can get the database into source control really quickly. They can do development and source control and deployment from within the same tooling that everybody's used to without needing to learn anything. They can still encompass Visual Studio Code and that local development process. And they can still encompass the mature teams who are doing things already, who are able to work within outside of Fabric already. They're still going to be able to do those deployments. Perfect? No. There are things that you're going to find where you're going to be able to break it, like all the things that come through that are new, especially like some of the things in Fabric. But you've seen it is capable. Okay, my name is Rob. I am delighted to have been talking to you. So I'm going to give you the chance to ask some questions if you would like to. Yeah, thanks, Steve. I wish somebody had shouted that at me. Said the index on the views got the same thing. Yeah, I mean this is absolutely. I never mind, unless we're doing a keynote at a Microsoft Build or an Ignite or something, then let's do things live. Let's break things. Let's fix them because it's real. It's real life. That development process is exactly what happens in my day-to-day life. Is exactly what happens everybody else does. Don't forget, of course, you can see, I think it's Ginger and Monica in 2 weeks' time. They're talking about the next one in the queue. Yeah, panic and fix it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we can panic and fix it. Hey, Iona, that was some of your code that we showed there. Fabric tools. There we go. So that was really cool.
Okay, so if no question, we're going to close it. The recording will be available within a couple of days. We are all volunteers. We have other stuff. I'll upload the recordings in YouTube channel. Better to subscribe so you can see everything. We don't make any money if we have more people subscribe or don't subscribe. Trust me. We are zero budget user group, so I'm not trying to make money out of it. But please keep an eye for the coming up sessions. And thank you, Rob. You can always follow up with Rob. Rob is very responsive. I personally have experience. So if you come up with something, I'm sure, if you send an email or let Rob know, I'm sure he will get in touch with you. He needs sometimes because I don't know how he does all the stuff that he does besides his cycling. So be patient, please. Thank you again, folks. I'll see you in 2 weeks, the last session of this series. And then we have some tremendous one coming up. Keep an eye on the Meetup channel. So thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob.
Ciao, ciao.
Have a great day. Bye.